Hi, I'm Colin Hung with Healthcare IT Today, where we explore the latest trends and interesting stories in health IT. On today's program, we're going to be talking about practical interoperability. Our guests today are Erik Jacob, Director of Interoperability at Rochester Regional Health, and Charlie Harp, CEO at Clinical Architecture, a frequent guest on our program. I can't wait to ask both of them why they believe that interoperability must be more than an academic exercise and why it needs to be more practical. Erik, Charlie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
All right. So, Erik, before we dive into the deep discussion around interoperability, can you give our audience a bit of a brief overview of Rochester Regional Health?
Certainly. Well, Rochester Regional formed by merging crosstown health systems back in the mid-2010s. And since then, moved from combined 3 hospitals to an 8-hospital system right now. And it spreads across Western New York as well as Northern New York with a group of 3 hospitals. So at this point, we're the largest geographic spread in New York State for a health system and provide acute care, certainly ambulatory services, elder care, and home health.
So it sounds like you do it all.
A little bit of everything, yes.
Excellent. And you're actually not too far away from where I am and here in Toronto. We're just across the lake from each other, which is great. So
on a clear day, maybe we can see each other.
That's right. We'll wave to each other from across the lake. So, Erik, I understand that one of the very first things that your team did at Rochester Regional Health was to make lab data interoperable with your Epic system. Why did you start with lab data?
Well, starting with labs seemed to make sense. We had some expertise from an enterprise health information exchange that we had to do a lot of mapping with. But when we moved to Epic, we retired that system and wanted to have the same level of granularity and accuracy for our providers. So we needed to come up with a way to bring in external data from many of the health information exchanges of New York State to augment our chart. So lab data has some good standards to rely on, very good data points, but it's all about looking at that content and seeing how we can get it to the individual providers to make their decisions.
And Erik, did you have to do anything special to make that lab data interoperable, especially from those different sources? It sounds like from the health information exchanges up there.
Well, we started in the world of version 2 HL7, so everything's a little bit different, and we really needed to come up with a way to really understand what data was in there, what could we work with, how do we establish quality, how do we set rules around what we're going to do, and give our team procedures on what we're going to look at, and then come up with a way to bring that in at the high volume that is out there. So we did call on some old expertise with Charlie in clinical architecture to help design.
You call me old, Erik?
Yeah. Not at all.
I'm not that old.
We've been at this for a little while together.
We are salty dogs. That's true.
So let me go there, Charlie. So what did your team have to do to make that data interoperable? Was it a challenge to get the data from those health information exchanges and all that lab data into a usable format?
I mean, Erik and his team were already pulling all the data in through their interfaces into Epic. The thing about lab data is when you think about all the different telemetry we get about a patient, medications are important because it lets us know what's going on with the patient from a treatment perspective and can kind of give us insight into what their likely diagnosis is if you don't have that. But lab data is like the closest thing you have to status on a human being and how they're doing. So vital signs, lab data, those are all kind of what I would consider to be critical telemetry. And the challenge you have when you're getting data from external sources is if you can't reconcile it appropriately, you can't get in front of the provider who needs that vital telemetry so they can kind of get a feel for where the patient's at. The challenge with labs, and I've been working with lab systems to kind of confirm the attestation that I am old by my dear friend Erik, since 1987. And when you look at lab data, we use LOINC today to normalize that data. But the issue you have sometimes is that not everybody really understands the granularity of LOINC, and not everybody today provides LOINC, but we have enough things in the lab stream, especially if you're pulling something from an HL7 message, FHIR or CCDA, to typically identify what the appropriate code is if you're trying to normalize. And there were some additional things we did specifically to help with the integration with Epic and to get things organized in a way that Epic could process it appropriately. But lab is one of those things where if you've been doing it for a while, you kind of know which things are most important to be able to line everything up and find the right place for you to land that data. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and that's perfect. No, thanks for that color, Charlie. I really appreciate that. Erik, one of the things you mentioned to me off air was how making the investment in the lab data and making it interoperable is paying off, especially when it comes to acquisitions, which is a little bit odd to me. I wouldn't have thought about acquisitions as a use case for lab data. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly. So a lot of the process around, an expanding health system would be related to taking an accounting of the existing systems, the content, and kind of working towards consolidating those IT systems to a standard stack. So at that point, now you're on the, a standard lab system, a standard EMR, you'll want to do a conversion of the historical content. And a lot of times that is a arduous task of taking each individual thing, identifying what it is, where it fits. And sometimes that effort is just too much to, take on, in a kind of a cost benefit, but getting information into the chart in the exact place that it should be, where if the physician or anyone else reviewing that chart is looking for that information as if it was recorded directly from the lab system that you're currently using, you want that information in the same place. So it's visible, it's actionable, it's reviewable, it fits into metrics and analytics. All of those things really help. So using the tool that we kind of designed for live results, we found we could also use that standard conversion to speed the process of mapping the historical data into a conversion effort. And I think we were looking at a team of multiple pathologists, IT experts, and subject folks to really review that data and the exact measurement. But we did a comparison of maybe 12 folks sitting around a table, mapping all of that, and you're spending thousands and thousands of hours looking at that information over several months. We're able to run that same content directly through an interface into the design that we have created with Charlie. It gains us automation, it gains us scalability to tackle all of those things and really direct the review of those experts. Instead of a team of 12, we can now run through that information and put it in front of the head pathologist so he can make the final sign-off decisions. So you've really streamlined your data acquisition, the work to actually map, and the verification of that content. So it really drives a process that's repeatable and saves a lot of time when looking at converting information from one system to another.
Anything to add there, Charlie?
Yeah, it's not I mean, it's an issue that I see health systems dealing with kind of across the gamut. In the early days of clinical architecture, we spent a lot of time helping people with conversions. And, our goal was, with one client, we took what was a year-long project and turned it into like a 2-day project. So the mission of clinical architecture has always been maximizing the effectiveness of healthcare. And, our goal is to get the data to the point where it's usable, to get to the data and improve the quality without some kind of intelligent healthcare-oriented automation. What you're really looking at is, I always say it's a sweatshop of clinical people, slaving away for a long time, doing something that is repetitive and not necessarily wonderful. There are a few sick tickets like me that like that kind of thing, but most normal people do not. And to Erik's point too, it's not just true of lab data, that's true for medications, it's true for diagnoses, because a lot of these systems that send data still have their own local code systems. It's how those systems are built. And they're implementing a standard in a edge system is a non-trivial exercise. So it's one of those things where you'd like to say there should be an easy solution, we could just tweak this or install SNOMED or do whatever. But in reality, healthcare evolves from the edges, and those edges need to have the flexibility to do things the way they need to do things to help take care of patients. And so it's one of those things where I don't think it's a problem that's going to go away anytime soon.
Now, both of you shared a very interesting conversation you had with each other. And as I understand it, Charlie, I think you asked Erik something like, if you could turn on the fire hose of interoperable data from all the different possible data sources, would you do it? Erik, how did you respond to that question?
Well, I think while I'm after that goal, I want to do it in the right way. So my immediate answer was absolutely not. Don't turn it all on. But we need to look at the data, and we need to make it purposeful in the consumption of that information. Just bringing a document in it's a great step forward because now you have it. But the reality is exchanging, full CCDA documents, they're not looking at them. So if you don't have an automation to pull pieces of information that fit your clinical needs or your analytical needs or population health needs, so you're pulling something very specific, and that something very specific isn't always in the format that you need to really understand that. And that's where taking that and that last mile from standard codes now back to local codes so that it's well understood inside the consuming system, that's the power of interoperability. By taking that, now you've obtained it, now you need to leverage it and make improvements for your patients, for your providers, streamline the process, streamline the care, make it better.
Charlie, were you surprised at Erik's answer?
No, I mean, it's one of those things where when you look at what we're doing in healthcare today, if you look at the last 10 years of interoperability, a lot of it was pushing messages around so they're available to a provider to read as if they had time to read, hundreds of pages of historical medical documents as text. The problem we have, and as we move forward with initiatives like TEFCA, with the QHINs, and kind of, let's say, normalizing interoperability, when you look at what ONC is doing with the US CDI and establishing certain standards, those are all excellent moves. Those are all foundational, important things to do. The next thing we need to do, and I've talked to a number of QHINs, and I think, they are thinking along these lines, is if you're going to turn on a tsunami of information for the patients under your care, the real question is, are you ready to receive that tsunami in a meaningful way? And do you trust that data to, it was one thing to say, hey, here's something you might want to look at versus here's something that I've got from this other place, and I'm going to make it part of your permanent record. So when the provider sees the patient in his system or her system, they are seeing data that they can rely on. So I think when it comes to doing this, Erik's response to me falls in the category of, is the juice worth the squeeze, as my grandmother would say. And so the question is, it's great for us to receive data, but even looking at the lab data that Rochester is getting from their exchange partners, their labs, there's a certain amount of lift that goes into making that data something that they can actually take advantage of. And that's work. And we just have to figure out over time, how can we as an industry make sure that what we're sending out is the highest quality and is consumable? Because right now the onus of making use of data is always on the receiver. That's what I tell all my clients. The people sending data out, they don't have to worry about that data. It's going out. It's no longer their problem. They're satisfying the requirement to be able to send data out. It's the person receiving that data that has the burden of making sure the data is usable. And that can be challenging. So no, it didn't surprise me.
It reminds me of a saying I heard a long time ago around, data. Data without purpose is just noise, right? And why would you invest in creating more noise for yourself, right? To your point, Charlie, and to your point, Erik, it's incumbent upon the receiver of that data to make use of it. And if you can't use it, then the question has to be, why you want it in the first place, right? Just because it's there doesn't mean you should, just make it available. I think I like what both of you are saying.
With TEFCA, the trick is going to be managing expectations, because we have a history in this industry of getting excited about a technology or an advancement. And if it doesn't pay immediate dividends, we're like, well, that didn't work. But the truth is, when it comes to USCDI, when it comes to TEFCA, these are foundational things that we still have to figure out. It's kind of like ChatGPT, ChatGPT is an interesting technology, large language models, high-speed automated fabrication is really what they are. We have to figure out if we can put them to good use and how we do that. And it's no different from these other things we're kind of rolling out into healthcare. They're foundational. We just have to figure out what to stand on top of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing, Charlie, you mentioned was, how do we trust? How do we build that trust in the information? It's not just establishing, the pipes or the networks or the QINs or, HIE, or packaging something and attaching it to direct and, getting it out to that provider. What was put into identifying that information accurately at the source? And you're spot on with, it's on the receiver. How much are we going to trust that information to make care decisions? And if this works in the way that it should, you're not going to have to repeat tests. You're not going to have to re-perform that. So you have to have this implicit level of trust that just isn't there at this time. And one of the key aspects that the team works on a daily basis is, do we trust this enough? What are the criteria? How do we call this high quality and put it into a place that's usable and actionable, versus let's not put that in? That's something that we can't rely on. And clinicians making decisions on something that you say you can't, there's a portion that you can't rely on, don't put it in the same place. Don't make it identical to the information that you act on. But that's really the big push of anyone in interoperability. It's not just getting the information to someone. It's, how do you know that it's the same as if it, I pick up the phone and call my lab right here on site. I trust them. How do I do the same for outside information? That's really the business that anyone working in interoperability has to be in. And that has to be their focus. How do we build trust?
Erik, Charlie, you guys have both shared a lot of great information today, but let me ask you this question. What advice do you have for anyone listening or watching this in terms of achieving interoperability, or as we're talking about, practical interoperability? Charlie, let's start with you.
I mean, I think when you look at Rochester and the decisions they've made around the lab stuff, you have to put the work in, because even though an individual provider taking care of a patient is doing a good job and they're doing their best, and they might be operating against their notes and they know what they know and they're talking to the patient, they're having a real experience with the patient. We've gotten to the point in healthcare where these systems that we use augment that care. They're how we track activity and performance at a population level. So we can't just get back to saying, well, I'm treating the patient okay. You have to put the work in so that these systems can help. There's just too much, there are too few providers, there are too many patients, there's too much happening in healthcare for us not to be able to leverage that. And if you look at what happened at Rochester, it was something as straightforward as, I don't want to have to search for this external result. I want it to appear somewhere that makes logical sense to me, the provider, when I see the patient. That is practical interoperability. There's data out there that's going to materially affect how I can take care of my patient, and it's got to be somewhere where I can find it. But if you take that concept and you blow it out when it comes to decision support, quality measures, value-based care, population health, AI, ML, all of those things require you to put in the work necessary to improve the quality of your data. You just have to do it. It's not an option.
Erik, what advice do you have?
Well, I couldn't agree with Charlie more. It really is looking at the information, finding ways to be able to identify your trust, identify your quality, and focus on the things that your stakeholders are interested in improving. So to learn that, you got to talk to them. You know, it's not just putting in a technical solution to have a cool technical solution. We have to talk with our physicians, gather their thoughts, their feedback. And once the information comes in, those are the things that we can tailor and custom build to meet their needs. Are there certain data sets that you want to prioritize? Are there service lines that need, more care? Even, it doesn't matter if it's lab data or any particular results-based information, notes, whatever it is. Pick, your use cases, because you're really building this to solve problems, not just to send data in, all across the nation. It's how do we solve the problems of not knowing, filling the gap. We have a kind of a team goal, and in this mission, we're looking at filling the gaps between the electronic record, birth to death. What are the gaps? Interoperability fills those gaps and allows them, the providers to be comfortable in their decisions, knowing that those gaps are well understood.
Colin, I would like to say one more thing.
Sure.
The folks at Rochester, Erik and his team, and the people that support them, they're a great example of people in healthcare who have a real passion for what we do. And as a vendor in healthcare, we're very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with people that are committed, innovative, and kind of really looking for ways to solve these problems. And it's been a real pleasure working with the folks at Rochester. I feel very grateful to have had that opportunity. And I'm not just saying that because Erik called me old. I'm saying that because I truly mean it. So thank you.
Erik, where can people go if they want to find more information about Rochester Regional Health?
How about rochesterregional.org? Health system website has all the services and information. You can find your doctors, find your locations for all those across the Rochester region and northern New York.
Awesome. And same question to you, Charlie. Where can people go to find more information about clinical architecture?
And you can go to clinicalarchitecture.com. You can also check in on the InfoMonster podcast.
Hey, listen, thank you to both of you for being on our program today. You've shared so much fantastic information. I think our audience is really going to enjoy this.
Let's hope.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Great seeing you guys today.
And hey, if you like this interview as much as I did, we'd love for you to go check out our other content at healthcareittoday.com. I'm Colin Hung, and we'll catch you on the next video.